Hello and welcome. You're with us here in Business Today, day 2 of the World Economic Forum meet at snow-covered Davos, and BTTV bringing you a treat today. The next half hour will bring you conversations with top corporate leaders, personalities who decide where hundreds of billions of dollars are invested. They also decide the direction economies will take, and these leaders have spoken exclusively to Business Today TV. But first, the top stories tonight. In a significant departure from optimism that we've seen in the last 2 years, PwC finds a large majority of global CEOs seeing a difficult 2023 in their exclusive survey. Business Today TV speaks to the global chairman of PwC at Davos to decode these results. Watch out for that exclusive interview. IMF's Gita Gopinath stated on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum summit that we're far from global recession territory. She added that the global economy will recover in the second half of 2023 as the IMF is seeing signs of resilience across the globe. For the first time, JSW Group confirms its mega plans to foray into the EV space. Chairman Sajjan Jindal tells Business Today TV in an exclusive interview at Davos that the company is working on a Tesla equivalent for India. The steel-to-power conglomerate says it has big plans to set up charging infrastructure for EVs. Adani Group's flagship company, Adani Enterprises, plans to raise 20,000 crore rupees via a follow-on public offer. Filed papers with market regulator SEBI. Issue is likely to open end of this month. Centre looks at incentivizing the alternative tax regime in this budget. Business Today TV has been told exclusively that the government is considering a single regime with larger slabs and a smaller number of exemptions. Well, first, our action-packed Davos coverage from day 2. First in line, according to a PricewaterhouseCoopers survey on global CEOs, 73% of CEOs now share a pessimistic view on economic growth in 2023. This is the most pessimistic outlook of the economy in over a decade. From the sidelines of the World Economic Forum, Business Today's managing editor Siddharth Zarabi had a chance to speak with PwC chairman Robert Moritz to understand the survey better.
Your latest survey, which is around 4,400 global CEOs, has a very interesting take from record optimism to record pessimism. Is the mood of global CEOs as captured by this survey, which has been literally released just a few hours back. Bob, tell us about the key takeaways.
The key takeaway is 73% of the CEOs are pessimistic about the global economy and its ability to grow next year. Let's put that into context. As you said, that is a record level of pessimism. And the last time we had this was back in 2008 and 2009 during the financial crisis. Now, I will say it's coming off first a relative comparison compared to last year. So it's not a surprise that that pessimism exists today when you look at the macroeconomic factors, inflation, rising interest rates, and the volatility and uncertainty that rests in the marketplace consistently around the globe right now. Because that pessimism is fairly consistent around the world on the economy as well as across multiple sectors. The interesting thing is geopolitics is now equally playing a part of that concern. And it's well beyond the China-U.S. stuff that we've talked about previously. It's going to what's happening in the Middle East. It's going to what's happening in the EU. And can we actually move forward and hold strong relevant to how they're actually dealing with the war, energy pricing, and the like. So there's a lot of pessimism in the system. The question on the table is, have CEOs gone too far last year on the optimism and maybe too far on the pessimism this year? And the question is how to manage our way through it. And that's the big aha.
We'll take that big aha. But you spoke about 2008. Would it be fair if some people were to assume after reading this survey that you are saying that it's a return of 2008?
No, the difference this time around is back in 2008, first it was caused by a shock to the system that no one saw coming. In this case, all of these factors that have driven the concern, we've seen. It's been building. It's been a boiling pot, so to speak. in terms of the issues. It's the magnitude of the issues, it's the combination and the amplification of these issues, and the economic implications. The second difference from 2008 and 2009, the amount of confidence CEOs had in their ability to grow revenues in 2008 and 2009 fell down dramatically, consistent with their view on the economy. This time, it's fallen, so they don't think they'll be able to grow as much their own revenues, but much less than ever before. Let's remember the CEOs went through COVID. There is a lot of muscle memory in terms of, okay, how do I change and direct the ship during really uncertain times? We continue to have them. In the past, it was solely COVID. Now it's a combination of other things.
There's another interesting point that this survey reveals, which is that 40% of the CEOs surveyed believe that their organizations won't survive in 10 years unless they transform. What does this really mean?
So the challenges that the world are seeing, when you add them all together, equate to significant disruptions to their economic and operating models right now. And that 40% where they are worried that they will not be economically viable over the next decade unless there's significant transformation is consistent across all sectors. So this is not a financial services issue or a healthcare issue.
So it's not sorry to interrupt you, but it's not a trend issue. It's not like technology making a certain way of business process obsolete.
This is a systemic issue of how do you manage change in a big-time way.
Now, why did it happen, Bob?
Well, you've got a couple of different reasons, and let me bring them to life with some examples, because that 40% actually varies quite a bit around the world.
Absolutely.
In China, that number is close to 70%. In Japan, that number is close to 70%, but for two radically different reasons. In China, it's driven by, over the next 10 years, they know they're going to have to actually pay significantly different to attract and gain energy. It's going to move away from coal in that country, as we know, as you look at sort of the climate implications, and they're going to have to pay top dollar for that. It'll have implications to their business, their margins, their P&Ls, and likewise. In Japan, it's actually how will consumers consume. It's a big challenge. In Brazil, it's a record low. It's in the 20s. Now, that part of the world has not been affected by technology very much. They're seeing the biggest reason for that change. Technology change is coming their way, similar to what we've seen in India, in China, in the U.S., and other places like that.
And what's the sort of sub-trend in India?
The sub-trend in India is actually twofold. One is consumers, in terms of how do they consume products and services, especially as India as a country brings that manufacturing and balances it with the services industry. And the second issue is how, in fact, the technology will implicate how the businesses now manage.
Okay.
They have to manage themselves, not providing technology to the world, which is what they do very well.
With China's COVID emergency assuming front stage, are businesses prepared for the impact? Does India stand to benefit from the ongoing crisis in China? Rahul Kanwal, news editor, India Today and Aaj Tak, takes stock of the situation unraveling in China with industry experts. Adar Poonawala, chairman and CEO of the Serum Institute, and Tata Steel's TV Narendran. Take a look.
Give us your sense of what's happening inside China.
Great to be here with you, Rahul. You know, a lot of people here from different parts of the world have been concerned about China. And of course, being our close neighbors, we're watching how the situation unravels. India, because of its excellent vaccine coverage and the herd immunity, because we allowed infections to spread like other countries and didn't have a zero COVID policy after the initial lockdowns, India, along with other countries, are in a far better situation. Do I fear, you know, this sort of thing happening in India again, like what's happening in China? I don't think so, because, as I mentioned, our vaccine has been very effective and the coverage has been very effective. China, sadly, has not had both of those situations pan out, and we just pray and hope that they solve their issue. In fact, I was talking to some people to try and offer the Western vaccines and Indian vaccines to them as boosters, so they can control their hospitalizations and come out of even spreading the infection.
Are the Chinese interested in your vaccine?
You know, I've requested them to put political issues aside and just look at the bigger picture, because, you know, for the world, it's important that China comes back also. You know, and we just wish them the best in a speedy recovery, because if you look at supply chain disruptions, investments, uncertainty, people are still a little uncertain to make investments in this part of the world because of what's happening there. But of course, given that You've seen the response here. India is definitely by far the most reliable and chosen destination for investors, and given the choice, of course, India stands far ahead.
I started by asking Adar about what's happening in China, because what's happening in China from a health emergency perspective also is potentially one of the biggest opportunities for India as global companies realign their supply chains. To what extent do you think at this moment, in the way things are, is India being able to benefit from the idea that companies need to look beyond China in this China plus one strategy of it?
I think that's playing out quite favorably for India, because the aftershocks of what just happened in China, but also what's happened in Ukraine and Russia, has made organizations, global companies look at de-risking supply chains. It's no longer about cost optimization, but about resilience, managing risks, etc. So when they're looking at another place beyond China, obviously there are other contenders. But India is special because India is not just a source, it can also be a market. And with the PLI schemes and the government trying to do more to attract investments, there is certainly a strong case for investments to come into India, which you've seen in electronics and traditionally areas where we've not seen so much of investments. So I think it's a good time for India.
Likely to be one of the beneficiaries along with, say, Vietnam, Indonesia, some other countries, or do you see India as being the prime beneficiary because companies are now desperate to move part of their supply chains out of China?
The de-risking of supply chains actually started maybe a few years back. It got triggered first with Fukushima because that disrupted a lot of supply chains. At that time, when people were looking at a choice beyond China, most people went to Vietnam actually. Textile industry went to Bangladesh. I think India lost out in that wave. I think at this time, India is being positioned better. I think the policies are more favorable for investments. The Indian market is also showing a lot more potential and promise. So I think now it seems to be that the stars are aligned in favor of India. It's for us to mess it up. But having said that, I think while at the central level we're doing a lot of work, finally the investments happen at the states. So a lot depends on how the states also deal with this opportunity. I'm happy to see a lot of states here trying to market themselves. But I think ultimately investors will look at the experience that they have and they really come and put money on the ground.
Do you see India Inc. investing in the India story, given that capacity utilization has been in the mid-70s for a long time? Tata Steel has announced big capital expenditure plans, but a lot of India Inc. still holding back. Do you see that change, or do you think global turbulence will mean that companies would like to stay on the fence for a little longer?
So if you're an export-driven company, then obviously you would look at what's happening globally. But if you're primarily dependent on Indian demand, like a lot of the steel industry is, then you would invest. Because with the government focus on infrastructure, India is seeing infrastructure-led growth, investment-led growth. Traditionally, it's been consumption-led growth. So that's making it better. But if you really look at private sector investment 10 years back, the three big sectors were steel, power and chemicals. Power is pretty much gone out because those were thermal power plants, coal-based power plants. Now it's more renewables. But I think steel and chemicals is coming back. Steel has certainly come back. Last 6 months we had a problem. But otherwise steel is certainly coming back on track for investments. I see a lot of investments in supply chains, for instance, warehousing, supply chains and electronics manufacturing.
In an exclusive conversation with Business Today TV's managing editor Siddharth Zarabi, Prashant Ruya, director of SR Capital, talks about how the SR Group managed to become debt-free after repaying a massive $25 billion debt, and believes that the group is now entering a growth phase. Listen in.
You've been busy for the last few years reinventing the SR Group. Tell us about what that process has been like and where you stand today.
From an SR perspective, it's been an interesting period last few years. As you know, we've been involved in metals and mining, energy, infrastructure businesses. But we obviously went through a phase of deleveraging the group. We monetized some of our assets. We delevered about $25 billion, which I do believe is one of the largest corporate deleveragings in India.
$25 billion over what period of time?
Over the last 3 to 4 years.
And what's the rupee value for that?
It's about 200,000 crores.
200,000 crore. I just want that headline to sink in. 200,000 crore in less than 5 years.
In less than 5 years, yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, we decided a few years ago that we wanted to delever, we wanted to monetize, and the only way we felt the right way to do that would be to monetize some of our key assets, which we did. that led to, that process is now largely complete, and that has led to this significant deleveraging. The monetization values which we received, which was obviously around 200,000 crores.
So what are the companies, just for the people of who are watching us,
yeah.
SR Steel?
Yeah, it's basically SR Steel, SR Oil, the refinery, and then we had a BPO business which we also monetized, and then a few other bits and bobs.
So the debt is done and dusted?
The debt is done and dusted. I would say 100% we have repaid all the debt, and 100% we are repaying all the debt of the Indian banking system.
Okay, and what are the implications of that for your future strategy?
So exactly. So we decided our strategy around three themes. The first theme was deleveraging, which is largely now complete. The second was consolidation of the operating companies within the group post the monetization. That process also we have now largely complete over the last 2 years. And now we are entering the phase of growth once again.
Before we take you to the rest of our Davos coverage, let's take a quick look at how markets fared today. Nearly 1% gains on the benchmarks, Nifty above the important 18,000 mark, that's 160 points at close. Sensex ending above 60,000, up about 500 odd points today. All sectors trading in the green, barring PSU banks and media. Mild pressure in some of the pharma names as well, and flattish to marginal declines in the broader markets. L&T, Hindustan Unilever, HDFC, HCL Tech, TCS, some of the top movers today. And on the downside, financials like SBI, Bajaj Finserv, IndusInd Bank, Wipro and Tata Steel were the top Nifty losers, but mild cuts as you can see there. Here's a BTTV exclusive. Sources have been telling us that the government is considering provisions to promote a new personal tax regime. Among the many considerations, a tax-free slab of up to 5 lakh rupees is on the radar. My colleague Karishma Sudani is joining us with the details and what she's picking up from her sources.
Well, absolutely right, Abha. You know, the government and centre, of course, are working towards the new tax regime. And what we are picking up in the budget announcement is that government could actually incentivize the alternative tax regime. Now, this is, of course, being done to attract more and more taxpayers to use this regime, because most of them have been using the old regime as of now. So one major provision that's being considered is to make taxpayers to opt for the alternative tax regime by making the 5 lakh per annum slab tax-free, which is currently, of course, taxed at 5% in the new regime without any kind of exemptions and deductions. So that is one provision. The second that the government is looking is to try and broaden the tax brackets and also remove as many as exemptions and deductions, but incentivize them in the right manner in a way that they could be helpful in under Section 80C and 80D, that is of the Income Tax Act, for availing few income tax benefits by the individuals. Now, this could definitely, announcement could be expected in the budget, but further going on a broader note, in the longer run, the government only wants to have one tax regime. So, if you talk about 3 years down the line, there is not going to be any old or new, but one major tax regime that the taxpayers will have to adopt to.
Spotlight back on our Davos coverage. While speaking on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Mahindras MD and CEO Anish Shah says that the company is well positioned and is delivering quality like never before. He went on to say that India will benefit as the world seeks alternative supply sources and that India has the ability to attract foreign investors. Listen in.
India has just become the 3rd largest automobile market in the world, beating Japan. What are your growth prospects for this year?
Very bright. So we've gone through the last 18 months or so with lots of challenges, but beyond the challenges, we had 3 mega launches. The first one sold 50,000 in 3 days. That was a Thar. The second, the XUV 700, sold 50,000 in 3 hours. And then the Scorpio N had 100,000 in 30 minutes. So we are actually very well positioned right now. We are delivering a quality that's far higher than what we've done in the past, and that competes with all the global majors. And we're in a position we're actually beating them at their game.
JSW Group's chairman Sajjan Jindal sounding optimistic on India's EV space in an interview with BTTV managing editor Siddharth Rabi, confirming the company's plans to enter the EV market and come up with a Tesla equivalent for India. Here's a slice from that conversation.
There's some talk about a new electric vehicle for 2-wheelers, 4-wheelers. some other companies have got into it. This is the new sunrise sector. Tell us about your plans there.
Well, personally, I'm very passionate about cars, and that's been my childhood passion. And I've been really wanting to build a car project for a long time. We started working a few years ago in building that project, but somehow we dropped it. But I think now is the time when somebody needs to build a very high quality car in India. Could be something like a Tesla from India, and that's what I'm really working on.
अरे वाह, भारत की टेस्ला गाड़ी. I have to ask you also for our wider audience on other platforms. ये प्लान क्या है? सज्जन जिंदल गाड़ी बनाएंगे, इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ी बनाएंगे, और टेस्ला से compete करने की आपने एम्बिशन बताइए, थोड़ा और विस्तार में समझाइए.
नहीं, अभी ये बहुत अर्ली डेज हैं. अभी हम लोग इसके ऊपर काफी काम कर रहे हैं और पूरी टीम इस टेक्नोलॉजी प्लेटफॉर्म के ऊपर काम कर रही है, क्योंकि आजकल की गाड़ी अगर आप देखें, जो फ्यूचर की गाड़ी है, वो उसके अंदर इंजन नहीं है, उसके अंदर बहुत डिफरेंट टाइप की गाड़ी है. तो जो एक कन्वेंशनल गाड़ी बनाने वाली कंपनी है, उसकी जो थॉट प्रोसेस है, वो एक कन्वेंशनल गाड़ी बनाने का ही थॉट प्रोसेस है. हम लोग दूसरे लोग हैं, हम लोग को तो गाड़ी के बारे में कुछ पता नहीं है. तो
आप स्टील बनाते हैं?
स्टील बनाते हैं, लेकिन गाड़ी नहीं बनाते. हम गाड़ी वालों को स्टील सप्लाई करते हैं. तो आइडिया ये है कि why not make a car from India which would be for the world market. That is my basic idea. Not only we will make car for India, but for Europe, for America, for Japan. We want to export to the world market, and that would be the quality of that car. That is the whole idea.
बहुत साल पहले मैं जहां काम करता था, हमारे अखबार में हमने एक हेडलाइन चलाई थी, टाटा की लखटकिया, और ये गाड़ी थी जो टाटा ने नैनो लॉन्च की थी. 2-3 साल बाद या जब भी ये प्लान आपका पूरा होगा, तो उस टाइम कैसी हेडलाइन आएगी?
नहीं, हम लोग सस्ती गाड़ी बनाने का प्रोग्राम में नहीं है. हमारा आइडिया है कि ये एक जो भारत के अंदर जो एक बहुत बढ़िया गाड़ी जैसे मर्सिडीज, BMW, ये जो गाड़ी हम लोग को इंपोर्ट करनी पड़ती है, वो ना करनी पड़े, और हम उसकी टक्कर की गाड़ी हम अपने देशवासियों के लिए दें, और जिसकी की मूल्य प्राइस उससे काफी कम होगा, क्योंकि हमको उतनी मैं उसका कंपैरेबल देता हूं कि स्टील के अंदर जब हम लोग स्टील लगा रहे थे, तो लोग बोलते थे कि बड़ी बड़ी स्टील कंपनियां भारत में हैं, 100-100 साल पुरानी हैं, आप कैसे स्टील बनाओगे, या दुनिया के अंदर इतनी बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां हैं, जापान की कंपनियां हैं. आज हमारी स्टील कंपनी शायद दुनिया की सबसे नंबर 1 स्टील कंपनी है. सबसे अच्छी क्वालिटी बनाते हैं, सबसे अच्छी टेक्नोलॉजी है. तो बिल्कुल उसी तरीके से अगर हम बहुत फोकस होकर एक बहुत बढ़िया गाड़ी बनाने का प्लेटफॉर्म के ऊपर काम करें, जो हम कर रहे हैं, तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि उसमें कोई तकलीफ होगी.
You made a very important point that you are not going to be a price warrior, and since you are talking about exports, therefore it will be global standards, and India has a massive automotive manufacturing base that's been developed. I want to follow this question up with the challenges that the electric vehicle space has witnessed so far. One of the consumer feedbacks, Mr. Jindal, is that the battery and storage technology, both in terms of some bad incidents that have happened, and the storage infrastructure, charging infrastructure, is a challenge in India. Is that why you are looking for global markets in the start, and you will then go into the domestic markets? Am I understanding this right?
नहीं, ये जो आपने बताया कि बैटरी स्टोरेज, बैटरी चार्जिंग, कार चार्जिंग, ये कंस्ट्रेंट है, एक इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर देश में नहीं है. लेकिन मेरा बिलीफ क्या है कि हमारा देश एक बहुत ही इट्स अ वेरी विचित्र देश है, फनी कंट्री. आई डोंट नो फनी इज द राइट वर्ड, बट इंडिया इज एन ग्रेट नेशन.
एक मार्केट में बहुत मार्केट है.
हाँ, एक मार्केट में बहुत मार्केट है. अब आप देखिए, जब ये मोबाइल फोन नहीं थे, उससे पहले ये PCO थे, पब्लिक क्या बोलते हैं, कॉल ऑफिस, राइट. हर दुकान के बाहर एक PCO का टेलीफोन लग गया था. तो मेरा जो थॉट प्रोसेस है वो ये है कि हर घर वाला अपने बाहर एक केबल लगा देगा कि आप आइए, अपनी गाड़ी यहां चार्ज कर लीजिए. हर दुकान के सामने एक चार्जिंग पॉइंट आ जाएगा. तो और हर पेट्रोल पंप के ऊपर सुपर चार्जर लग जाएंगे. तो मुझे लगता नहीं अगले 2 साल में आप देखिएगा कि हमारे देश में चार्जिंग का कोई कंस्ट्रेंट नहीं होगा.
अच्छा.
And that's where we leave it on the show tonight. Thanks so much for watching.